Hey guys, welcome to your Friday Senior Maxillary Week. I'm Dr. Myrdalis Diaz Ramirez, creator of the Maxillary Mastermind and the Design Your Physician Life podcast. And as you can see, we have a special guest today in the house. This is Mr. Tomas Rodriguez. Welcome to our Facebook Live.
Hello. Glad to be here.
So he's actually very involved in everything that we do. He's been involved in the creation of our Maxillary Mastermind. He's been involved in our Design Your Physician Life podcast, everything that happens there. And in our organization, he helps our physicians as well. So tell us a little bit about what you do with us in our Maxillary Mastermind and Design Your Physician Life podcast.
Well, my background is in, I'm an engineer. I have an MBA and I have a background in data science. I'm also a project management professional. So a lot of what I do in the mastermind is deal with the curriculums, do the co-hosting as well, but also help with project management issues, help with development of plans, and help with artificial intelligence, data science issues and stuff like that wherever I can, and also do some of the trainings with regards to mindset and setting goals and taking responsibility and stuff like that.
So you came to this project. We're husband and wife, and when I was looking for a mastermind, I wanted one where we can have a physician mastermind, and then I wanted one where I could bring him as part, not being a physician, but being somebody who's with so much education involved in our businesses. And then we created our Maxillary Mastermind, and that's where we are here. And we're here today because the topic of our last episode in our mastermind, in our podcast, Design Your Physician Life, if you haven't seen it, go there and see it. Design Your Physician Life was, will AI substitute the physicians, right? That's been a question that we've had, and to what extent, if it's going to happen, when it's going to happen. And we've been involved in learning a lot about this topic. It's something that we've been passionate about through the years. Personally, I used to be a programmer in C++, Pascal. We learned basic together. He's always, ahead of me in that situation. We've been together since high school, and we've had this career of technology. Having been somebody who's been working at institutions like Intel, you've been always very close to what development in technology is. And now with your degree in data science, being able to program, you can program in Python and design all these things. And then also you've been even a moderator in a healthcare AI conference as well. So you've done that. And right now you're also part of a mastermind that's specifically for artificial intelligence. So we are, and then I'm also taking a course, I'm finishing some certificates from Stanford, also on AI and healthcare. So it's our curiosity. It's something that we're very curious about, and we're concerned about, and we want to answer this question. I don't know that we can answer that question, but we certainly have some opinions of certain things that I believe are going to happen. So let's first discuss a little bit about data and modeling in general in terms of AI when we're talking about healthcare.
Sure. So in healthcare, right, the thing in healthcare, there's a lot of data that's generated, and there's a lot of data that's generated that would be nice to be mined to be able to make decisions, right? Better decisions about patient care, better decision about customer service, patient care as well. And so I think that's that. With regards to modeling, with regards to the models that are being put together, right? I think that a lot of the things that are coming together they're going to get to a point where, and I think this is what a lot of people worry, they're going to get to a point where the prediction that the models make are not only more trustworthy and more reliable than what physicians are going to be able to do at some point, but are also going to be more, people are going to start, there's going to be an inflection point where people are going to feel more at ease if the information comes from a computer. Now that we're not there yet, right? People are now on the physician's side, but I think at some point it's going to happen, right? Where people are going to say, well, who gave you that opinion? And somebody will say, oh, the computer, and they'll be like, oh, okay. Like, they'll feel more or a sense of satisfaction there. I think it's going to happen. It's going to be because at some point we're going to start to show that the models, predictability and their applicability and what they're producing, and we've shown that in many areas today, are more trustworthy. They're better, right? And not only better, but in a lot of cases they're going to be more compassionate. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on there. So I think.
Why do you say more compassionate, the models?
Because I think a lot of the models are building in a lot of human a lot of human emotion, a lot of human understanding of how to get things done. And us as humans, we tend to shortcut those things, right? So sometimes we want to get down to, for example, as a physician, you want to get down and tell the patient, okay, so here are the things you have to do, here are the things you have to focus on. So we make calls on how to deliver that message. And I think that the models will be more cognizant to be able to add the degree of emotional intelligence as a process that a lot of times humans skip through, right? And I think that that's going to be the case. A lot of the models are going to be more difficult to explain, so there's explainable AI and stuff going on there. But eventually that'll change, right? Like today we get a lot of pushback, and people will say things like, well, artificial can't do this or can't do that. But what you got to realize is just in 2023 is when all this has happened, right? And of course, there's a lot of stuff that's been happening before. But the conversation about AI and the application of AI into business at the level that we're seeing it now, like you think about Midjourney, you think about ChatGPT, you think about, these are all 2023 discussions, even though there were some development before. So in a year, we've seen all that development. So when a lot of people come back and say, oh, AI can't do this, AI can't do that, what I typically say is, well, give it a month, it will probably be there, right? So I think a lot of these things are coming, and I think where physicians are going to have a lot of the challenges to say, okay, so where do I add value? And I think that the value proposition for physicians is going to move from information, because information is going to be so easy to attain, to more of a skill set based approach. Like you're either going to have to demonstrate that you have a certain skill that computers will take longer, robots will take longer to replace, or that you have a process and a framework that makes it so easy that and so easy for patients that they're not going to go, like say, jump on a ChatGPT and get a recommendation for some health condition that they have, right? So you either make it real easy, or you have a skill that's going to be more difficult to replace, right?
Something that I want to bring up is that you're here also not only because of your technological background, but you've been manager of medical clinics. Now
Right.
you have almost like around 9 years at least of medical clinic management. So you've been dealing with physicians, you know how the system works with and without insurance companies. So you've seen a lot of what's brought not only for physicians who are people who do procedures, but also primary care, concierge, and so you have a whole vision from the technological point of view, from the management point of view, and for this point of view. One of the things that we're learning on AI in our courses is that, yes, there's this whole thing with ChatGPT having access to all this information, and you've been able to put information there. However, specifically for medical issues, it's not recommended, it's not allowed, it's not FDA approved, it's not something that would substitute from a medical point. That is not a tool. In the United States, at least, when you're doing a tool that's specifically for medical care, where you're going to be doing a diagnosis or a treatment, you need to have that tool go through the FDA. And then when you go through the FDA, you have to make sure, like, every time there's a change from the data that you gather for producing those models, to test those models, to prove the models, and when you're going back with feedback, you need to submit an arrangement to the FDA as well. So in terms of using these tools, we really don't have anything available yet. And if we mix the capability of having these tools with regulation, one could argue that we're years away from doing that, because you've been on these meetings where there's AI for healthcare with minds from all over the United States coming to these meetings, and you see how late we are as healthcare in that system. And it's not because necessarily like we're just late because we are healthcare and we're late. It's like there's a lot of steps that have to be happening. For example, in the quality of data, we know, and this is something that we discussed, in the quality of data that is taken to produce a model, we might have a lot of biases. That the data is old at this time, this is the type of patient that we were working with to collect that data, and then when we prove that, it might work for maybe the process in the hospital, in the university, but doesn't work for the community because it's a different population. And we've had that when the data was from men instead of from men and women, and even from Latino and African Americans, and then whites, they're going to be affected differently for different things. So with that taken into account, we still have cases where there are reports where they're using ChatGPT to diagnose, right? and that's already started to happen. So there's that situation where these tools to be used officially will not be readily available, maybe not even for 5 years right now. But we have other tools that are creating shortcuts for the population with models that we don't understand, with models that have not been proven, that we cannot really recreate necessarily, but they're already giving solutions to patients. So
Correct.
how do you see that dichotomy, right? We have the things that the FDA and the things that are approved for diagnostic and testing that have to go through this rigorous process, at the same time that we have some tools that are not meant for that purpose, but already the population is using them for
Right.
that, and we don't have like a regulation at a country level, national level for that yet.
Right, and what you're talking about is guardrails, right? And I think that we need to be very deliberate on how we put these guardrails in place, right? I mean, AI doesn't have a mind of its own in the sense that it's going to make its own decisions and force us to do it, right? I mean, we're anything that you see on I don't know, the Terminator is, we're very far away from anything like that, right? So anything that AI does is because we allow it to do it, right? And because we decided that we're gonna apply this model in a certain space. So we're definitely gonna want to put guardrails in areas that not only protect the patient, for example, but protect us as a society, right? Do we really want to let all this go? And I think that because the problem with AI, as you said, a lot of in medicine and in automated car driving and a lot of that kind of stuff, it's going to be in the implementation, right? It's going to be in releasing a model that if there's issue with it, now we have to have a huge recall, right? Normally, if a doctor makes if a cardiologist makes an error and a patient dies because of it, we don't ground all cardiologists. We don't say, okay, all cardiologists need to start operating until we can figure this out. Yeah. But if it is an AI and if it is something that's widely deployed and 100,000 versions of this operate off the same principles, if we do have that, we might have to ground that whole fleet of service. So that's gonna impede our development of a lot of this stuff, right? Our deployment. And in that sense, we want to be deliberate, right? And in that sense, we want to be deliberate, and we want to make sure that AI serves us, that AI is a tool that we're using in service of what we want to do. Now, the fact that there are people out there, you can ask AI anything and it's going to tell you an answer. It might be right, wrong, or different, but it's going to give you an answer. So the fact that there are people out there doing this is also inevitable. So we as a society have to kind of, again, put the guardrails and say, hey, what are we going to allow to do with regards to how do people service themselves, get the information that they need so that they can go and have that conversation with a physician, right? So patients should be getting a lot smarter. They should be showing up to the physician's office saying, well, what about this? What about that, right? So it's going to be a lot more than just seeing a commercial on TV. Now you're going to actually go to one of these tools and say, I have this condition, what could it be? Give me a plan for it, and what medication should I be on, and what should I talk to my doctor about? So that conversation should get smarter. But how we deploy it and where we allow the systems to actually prescribe or do whatever it is, right? Those are guardrails that we're going to have to be very intentional about, and we're going to have to kind of figure out how to do it. So both things are going to happen. Nobody's going to stop it, but we have to put the right guardrails in place so that we know when we're going to be able to release these things, like you said, by the FDA and stuff like that, and when we're going to what level are we going to allow the patients to be able to access the information, be able to take responsibility over their own health, but putting the guardrails in place so that they don't harm themselves until we really figure out this AI thing, right? This AI thing that's going on. Because the thing is, we released it, right? The AI is out there. It's doing all this stuff.
Well, let's talk about that, the AI that's out there, because there's different things. There's generative AI, which is what we're basically talking about, which is that conversation where you're feeding it information and then it's connecting the dots.
Correct.
One of the things that people might understand is how this happens. And I find this fascinating, the models of AI. There's different ways that you can model things. How does ChatGPT work when we're putting, it has access to 10%. There's different versions. The 3.5 has access to all, 10% of all the data in the internet before 2020, correct? Or 2022, I forget, no, 2020.
2021, yeah, but and that's changing too, right?
So that's changing. And then now in the 4 version is you have access to the live internet.
Yeah, now the data set is current.
Now everything's current.
Right.
And then, so they have access to all that data. Plus, but how is it I put a question, a prompt in ChatGPT, and it creates something that even though it's not FDA approved, I can ask it about my diagnosis, putting all my symptoms together, asking for a diagnosis, possible treatments, and how does that work from a model point of view?
Yeah, and this has been talked about a lot, but they're pretty much large language models, right? And what they are is there's a corpus of information. There's a lot of information that's put out together, right? If you want to think of it, it's like all this information we have from humanity that's out there, right? It's available to us. So what ChatGPT does, it's not a really smart system that knows a lot of stuff. No, it just has access to information. And all it's doing, and I know this is oversimplified, but it's how most people explain it. All ChatGPT is doing is when you put a word, it's trying to figure out what's the next word. And once it figures out those 3 words, it's trying to figure out what's the next word after that, right? The key is that when you ask it a question, you're sort of creating a vector through the data, right? You're sort of saying, this is what I'm looking at, this is the direction I want you to go at. So when you predict what the next word is, I want you to do it in this context, right? So if you're talking about fruits and you say I like, then it's going to be more likely it's going to say apples or bananas than if you say cars, I like Corvettes or Porsches, right? So that vector is going to help it determine that. But that's pretty much how it works, right? And you can put up really simple models, but I think somebody said, I haven't looked at it recently, but I think somebody said the whole code for these things are like 1,000 lines, right? Or something like that. So the code isn't very complicated. What is interesting is how it goes through the data, and that's why as these models have come out, we've started to figure out how do we talk to them. So even the people that developed the models didn't give us an instruction set on how to talk to it, because even they don't know how to talk to it to a certain degree. So we're learning how to do it. So when you hear about prompt engineering and all that's where that's going. But that's essentially how the model works, right? You have a huge amount of data, and you're throwing a vector through there and saying, I want you to focus on this. Right? So when you tell it something like, okay, ChatGPT, you're an engineer, chemical engineer with an expertise in whatever, I want you to create a recipe for chicken noodle soup, right? It's going to give you a very different response than if you say, you're a vegan, world-renowned chef, and I want you to create the same recipe, right? So it's going to, that vector that we give it gives us that information, but the information is pretty much trying to decide what comes next.
So then in putting this together as if this technology is going to substitute a physician right now.
Yeah.
The way, if we think about the way that the answers are produced, we should be a little bit worried, right? But a lot of people are going to come, it was Dr. Google before, I see it as Dr. ChatGPT coming to the office, not necessarily substituting, but just enriching that conversation with the patient for now. However, as these models are produced in a way that they get approved by the FDA, then we might get into situations where we do get some substitution of some of physicians, or needing much less, or maybe bridging the gap of the need that physicians we have. So in the groups of AI that you go to, has that been a conversation in terms of the physicians being substituted, or different professions that are just knowledge based like this?
Yes, physicians being substituted has not been that much of a discussion in the groups I've been in, but yes, people, right? And mostly the conversation is that people won't be substituted by AI, but people will be substituted by other people who are using AI, right? So for example, if I'm using AI in my process today and I make my process more efficient, next year I probably, without AI, next year I needed to hire 2 guys or 2 girls, right? Or 2 professionals to take care of me. I don't need to hire them anymore. So now those two positions remain not even vacant. They don't exist because I don't need those people. So in that sense, people that use AI will replace or displace people who don't. So I don't know if that specifically answers your question, but that's what we're saying. Now, when you look at physicians, and if physicians will be substituted, then that's where, at least from my point of view, preliminarily, what I'm thinking about is information versus skill, right? If you have a certain skill which you've acquired, and I'll be, let's talk about physical skill. If you're a surgeon, it's going to take a longer time for robots to replace you, right, and make all the right decisions. But if what you give out as information, for example, if you feel this, take this. If you feel that, take that. If you have these tests and it says this, then you likely have this. That information is cheap. So if that's what you depend on, I'm not going to say you're in trouble today, but you need to start thinking about what your value proposition is and where you add value, because information is going to be easily replaceable. And it's going to be information that is highly reliable. And in some cases, more reliable than the information you're going to receive from a physician, in some cases. And again, people will say, oh, but that's not true today. That's okay. Give it a couple of months, right? What I'm saying is that's where we're headed. And so in that sense...
So are you saying like in a couple of months, physicians could be substituted if we don't have anything that's FDA approved, for example, for diagnosing and therapeutics. In which
No,
ways?
I don't think in a couple of months physician will be substituted, right? I think it's going to take longer. But the reason it's going to take longer is not so much because the information is not as reliable as we think it is. That might be an issue, but that's an issue that'll be resolved. It'll be more because of our deliberate managing of how we release that, because we're concerned about widespread errors that might occur, and we'll have to do
biases, errors,
right, bias and stuff like that, and have to do resources. But physicians have biases too, right? So it's not so much that. It's more in the sense that, as I mentioned before, one physician makes an error, you don't ground those physicians, right? But if an AI makes an error and you have 2 billion people relying on them, you ground it, and then suddenly nobody has healthcare, right? So we're not going to replace the system like that. But I am saying physicians need to be cognizant that information is cheap. And the information that patients are going to have access to is something that's dramatically different than what we've had access to even a year ago. What that's going to look in 2 years is going to be unimaginable, right? The future of our future in the next 5 years, we're going to be it's going to be unrecognizable to us, because this is developing so fast that a lot of things we're saying, oh, that's impossible today, might be possible in 2 months. Might be possible in 6 months, right? Definitely in 2 years or 5 years or 10. So what I'm saying about physicians is, will they be replaced? Yes, at some point, right? We'll all be replaced at some point, right? But where is the value today? How do we protect ourselves against that? Well, one is society puts in the guardrails to say we don't want to overthrow society here. But at the same time, from a physician's point of view, where do I add value? Where do I have a particular skill set? Where am I making it easier, right, for my customers? And one thing that AI gives us is an incredible ability to fiercely understand our customer needs, right? There's a number of tools which you can deploy that'll help you create personas, create avatars, interact with them, make propositions, try to hone in on really what your customer needs. And that's where we need to be focusing on. As long as we know we have a fierce, identification of what our customer needs, we can deliver that solution, right? And I think that's where we need to focus on. Where do we add value? Where do we make it easier? And where do we provide a particular skill set? I think those are the most important things. Information, not so much, right? We still need to have access to information, but most people will have access to the same information that we'll have access to. Even though you went 12 years to a university, that information is available to me now with the simple prompt, right? It's really the skill set, the value that you add, how you make it easier. Is there a particular framework that you offer that makes it easier for me than to say, go to ChatGPT and start the discussion, right? Because the other thing which we need
One
to be
thing we want to
of,
say, by the way, we're not recommending people to go to ChatGPT. Let's make that clear.
right? And I use ChatGPT as an example, but we could say ChatGPT, Claude, Llama 2, any of these other
and still we're not telling people to go there.
No, absolutely
but
not.
Our concern is basically because of working in healthcare is that if those tools are going to be substituting, and I think that from the government point of view, it's going to be quite a challenge to put the guardrails in place to where people cannot use it for healthcare. For example, when the FDA, like right now, these were conversations that we both believe should have happened so many years ago.
Absolutely.
And the reason that we have the exploitation, like such a surge of generative AI is just because of the timing, right? We didn't have the programming skills before. We didn't have the tools. These things have been on the works since the 70s and maybe earlier. It's just we didn't have the processing capability. We didn't have the data sets there that now we have, for example, with the EHR, that we have access to all these data from patients, all these data from radiology that we can put together. And so that didn't exist before, and now it exists, and then we're putting it together. And for computational point of view, it's going to be even more when we have things like, higher levels of computing that we cannot imagine here today. So we are not recommending those things. We know they exist. The government right now is working on putting some guardrails for all this data, because obviously it's not only in healthcare, it's going to be affecting every fiber of every place, like the workforce to be displaced can be a huge thing. And talking about that, if AI is going to be substituting physicians, there's a lot that's been said that's not been happening right now because precisely substituting other people. But in general, it's if it's somebody that you're dealing with data, then most likely you're going to be substituted to some way or another. At the beginning, it's just making our jobs easier. It's letting us, have these tools that are really expanding the capabilities of that we have right now, where we maybe were not doing certain tasks. And if you see in a medical clinic, not only for the physician job itself, but for everything related to a physician, the way that the patient is processed, and it has made it much easier. And then now we have access to things that we didn't have before at no cost.
Right.
So
right.
it has really improved. So as you say, like data and knowledge is just, cheap. It's like almost zero right now. We all have access if you know what to ask in what way, understanding what the answers are going to be coming from and processing that. But the answers are going to be so, because the system is feeding itself all the time. The answers, the questions that we're asking are feeding the system. It's becoming so much better. Every second.
Right. And I think the key for physicians is, one, you need to be part of the conversation, right? So you need to learn how to use these tools. You need to learn how they're going to make your life easier, because in the short term and maybe in the medium long term, that's what they're here for. They're here to make your life easier. They're here to make your life more productive. They're here to deliver better solutions to the customers, to your patients, and it should all end in providing better care, right? And I think that's what the tools are available for us now to do. And it's implementation of talking about substitution and replacing a physician is something that's sometime in the future. And even then, you'll talk about certain functions, which will probably augment the physician's capability to deliver better service, right? So in that sense, when we talked about people using AI, replacing people that don't, you want to be, the group that does. So in that sense, yes, but in the sense of being able to make your processes better, being able to be more productive, being able to deliver a better product and better patient care. That's what it's about right now. So you need to be part of the conversation. You need to be part of the conversation with AI as well, and that's very important, because everything we're doing in AI is feeding the models. In a large part, in many areas, is feeding the models again. So we want to have that compassion. We want to have that care. We want to be telling it to do the right thing. So as we build these AI models and as they continue to develop, they're still in our service, right? And they're still providing the care that we believe that our patients need to have. So that's important, and that's really where the conversation needs to be right now with physicians. How do we get involved? How do we become part of this conversation? The issue of, am I going to be replaced in the next 5 years? I think it's not as important. Of course, people want to keep having a job, but the issue really is, how do we make AI tools that are being available in the future for us, being able to serve ourselves, serve our patients better, and being able to be in service of humanity versus in service of, a select few, right, for example.
And right now you belong to an AI mastermind, and I think that's a big, huge base of where they're wanting to build for the future, really making sure that AI is created and developed in the service of humanity.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about that. How has that group been talking about which tools can we use, and then trying to bring some of that into medicine for our listeners?
Yeah, so there's groups of people that are starting to get together because they don't want to be left behind, right? There's going to be a percentage of people that understand that what I said before, people using AI are going to replace people that are not, and they want to be on board. And there's other people that are even more altruistic than that, like people who lead the masterminds that we're in, and that really want to make sure that it's used as a force for good, and really want that good people are getting in this process so that we can that we can advance that, right? Exactly. So I think that's important, right? And I think that as good people come together and collaborate to make systems better and learn how to use them and learn how to feedback that process and feedback that knowledge and feedback those approaches, methodologies, frameworks, whatever, into AI itself, right, into these models, then the models will become more in our service. But that's what these groups are. These groups are people that are concerned about the future. They're concerned about implementation. They're concerned about taking advantage of everything that AI has to offer us. And frankly, of course, they're concerned about, the things that can go wrong, right? So they want to be engaged and make sure that we provide those guide rails, that we provide that path forward to a better future with AI. If we do this right, it can be amazing, right? We can have an amazing future. Will there be some disruption? Yes. Will there be some suffering because of it? Yes. Will society have to look at changing the whole equation of how we do things, how we've normally done things? Yes, probably. But if we do it together, if we kind of find a way to find each other, again and go through this together and make it a force for good and make it serve us, we should be able to get to the other side relatively well. But if we don't do it right, if we just leave it to the few to take care of this, and we kind of ignore the potential impacts, then we could be in a world of hurt, right? And that's why so many people are jumping on board and saying we really need to have this conversation. We need to move it forward. And in the case of physicians, we need to make this work for us as physicians and for our patients, right? And for healthcare in general, right? So that's kind of where we're at.
And that's why we wanted to bring this conversation. It's not that I necessarily think that AI will substitute physicians within the next 5 years, right. But we definitely, if we're not part of the conversation, we're out already, right? And yes, we could be substituted. If you're a surgeon, nobody's going to come for your job anytime soon, probably. Although they might come from if you're somebody like who's the diagnosing is taking you longer, if your algorithms are not as fast and accurate, then you might be able to, you might be in a situation where that's not going to be favorable to you. So one of the things that we want to invite people is that stay tuned. Go to our website, maxallure.com, MAXALLURE. Right now we're working on some projects to really help physicians come together and learn how you can become involved, learn how you can be part of the conversation, learn how to do some prompting engineer that's going to benefit the different areas of your business, and really basically future-proof your career, which is what we want to do.
Absolutely.
for our physicians. Any other comments before we leave? Any final thoughts?
No, I think it's a great discussion. It needs to continue. People need to jump on board. People need to validate their concerns and unvalidate their conspiracy theories, right? I mean, we need to really understand what this means, where the dangers are and where the opportunities are, and we have to learn how to mitigate them together, right? I think that's the bottom line, and we all move forward together, and hopefully we can have a better society in the future. We can have a better situation in the future than what could possibly happen if we don't take care. Right, so I think that's the bottom line.
So we have been gathering a lot of leaders in this area of artificial intelligence through our mastermind. So through our podcast. So go to our page. It's Design Your Physician Life podcast, and you listen not only from generative AI point of view, but how AI is being used in different areas. From the biomedical to the therapeutic areas, and how it's making our lives easier, the possibilities that we have in these episodes. And we have wonderful contributors, physicians who are also data scientists, who are computer scientists at the same time that they're physicians, and how they're bringing that knowledge for the benefit of our community. So go to our Design Your Physician Life podcast. Also do #replay so you can share this with others. And as I said, go to our website, maxallure.com, MAXALLURE, and subscribe to our email list, because we're working on a project that you won't want to miss regarding AI. So thank you for being here today. Thanks for your knowledge. Thanks for everything that you bring to our podcast and to our mastermind. And we're going to see you in the next week. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody.